Hello and welcome to our second official week of Hot Routes, episode 3 of Hot Routes. I have Matthew Coller of Purple Insider. You might have heard of him here with me to discuss some pressing Vikings news that has kind of come through the pike today on Monday and some broader NFL news. It was a busy Monday. Matt, I'm excited to have you on to break it all down on Hot Routes.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite a day to discuss Minnesota Vikings football. I feel like even as we record this about 24 hours after the Vikings lost, my Twitter feed is still completely full of people who want something to be changed as soon as possible. So I know we're going to get into that topic.
We are, but I want to start first with Danielle Hunter. Zimmer confirmed the news today during his press conference. Danielle Hunter is out for the year. Torn pectoral. Obviously a big blow to the Vikings, as even though after the loss, they're still in the playoff hunt right now. He was a big part of it. And suddenly that defensive line room, the depth starts to get questioned just a little bit. They moved on from Stephen Weatherly, now the Danielle Hunter injury. So, Matt, I want to talk about the future of what this means for Danielle Hunter in the long term, but right away, what do you just see as the big impacts from him now gone for the rest of the year?
Yeah, I mean, talk about tough timing. Like when they traded Stephen Weatherly, the one thing that we said was, okay, well, they must have some confidence in these younger players because even though Stephen Weatherly had not been producing and he got a sack in Denver against Taylor Heineke playing against Washington the other day, it was his first sack since 2019, though. And, he wasn't really producing. His snap count had reduced to less than 10 a game. So it was understandable why the Vikings would want to move on from Weatherly, but that move instantly looks pretty tough for them now because you're talking about moving in younger guys like Kenny Willekes, like Patrick Jones, and then it starts to sound a little bit like last year. And of course, DJ Wanham as well is going to take over the main reps from Danielle Hunter. But now it starts to sound like, okay, well, it's about younger players getting their opportunities and they're going to rotate in guys now. And all of a sudden, Everson Griffin, who was brought here to be a rotational player, has to have a lot of pressure on his shoulders to be their one and only proven pass rusher. And so far from DJ Wanham, where we've seen some flashes of him, getting after the passer, but it has not been on a consistent basis. He won the job out of training camp, but then lost the job to Everson Griffin, which is not something he should be ashamed of necessarily because Griffin has been great. But if DJ Wanham had risen to the challenge and been excellent, then Everson Griffin would have continued as a rotational player. Now it's, hey, buddy, you have to take over this huge amount of pressure for the rest of the season. And Danielle Hunter was not just playing okay. He was playing marvelous football. He was tracking toward being the comeback player of the year. He was tracking toward being one of the top pass rushers in sacks, one of the top pass rushers in pressures. His pass rush win rate was among the elites in the entire NFL. So now the Vikings are losing basically their entire pass rush here. And the thing that went without a whole lot of conversation after they lost to the Dallas Cowboys was they didn't get after Cooper Rush once Danielle Hunter went down. And even Cooper Rush, a guy who's never played before, if you give him time to sit back there and throw to good wide receivers, he's going to be able to do it. Now the Vikings have to go play two very good quarterbacks. Lamar Jackson is an MVP. Justin Herbert has had a couple of tough weeks, but we know how talented he is, and they have to do so without their best pass rusher. And then, of course, Aaron Rodgers coming up on the schedule 2 more times without Danielle Hunter. This is a major, major blow to a team that is already reeling.
Yeah, and suddenly the unit that we felt probably the most comfortable about in terms of what they were going to be on a week in, week out basis, with Everson really, really playing well, kind of a renaissance for him. And now that all throws into question because you just can't underestimate or overestimate or however how much attention Danielle Hunter gets and how much that affects all the positions along the offensive line. Like they're chipping him, they're bringing in an extra blocker. He's just constantly wrecking plays. And even if he's not getting sacks, he's forcing other things for Everson. We've seen that multiple times this year. Now that's not there. And you don't feel as good about where Everson is in a lead role. He was doing really, really well in that complementary role. And it's something he really didn't have to do a ton of throughout his career. He always had someone, for the most part, on that other side that could do something with him. And for a lot of years, that was Danielle Hunter, and now he's gone. And so we're going to see really what he has left in the tank. And yeah, that unit, I don't know. They need it to be good because we saw with the corners with the Cowboys. I mean, they just torched them. And so they need to get some sort of pressure. And just looking a little bit beyond this immediate future or the immediate, next few games, even this season, what do you do with Danielle at this point? Because, there were could he get traded before, this offseason? That was a topic of conversation. And it was, okay, but we probably need to see him after that injury to see if he is returned to form. We saw that, but now he's hurt again. And so now is this becoming habit? Is he becoming injury prone, or is it just another injury? And I just wonder, with the way the team's trending and everything, how you view Danielle's, position on this team moving forward.
Well, I think with an injury like this, you would probably say he is still young, and I know he's coming off of a neck and now a torn pectoral, and these are two very serious injuries, but he should have a lot of football left to go in his career. It does make his position harder from a negotiating spot. Next year, he's set to carry a $26 million cap hit, which will not happen. I mean, they are going to either, like you said, trade him, make a move there, or they are going to sign him to a contract extension. That's sort of the setup on purpose to have you go this way or that way with Danielle Hunter. And I think that they'll sign him to a contract extension, but it might be a short-term one. It might be very similar to what we've seen here, where they sign him to a short-term extension, and then he sort of has to go out and prove it that he could stay healthy for an entire year, because now we're going to be talking about playing 7 games since 2019. And even for a young player, that's a lot of injuries that are piling up on top of him. And unfortunately for Danielle Hunter, this is part of the conversation when you sign someone to a contract is, are you healthy? Can we rely on you? And a torn pectoral is probably just a bad luck type of injury. Anthony Barr had it last year. That's what kept him out for the entire season. So it isn't something where you say, oh, well, that's going to recur and that's going to be a problem. And he's not 34 years old, where how is he going to recover? Is he going to be able to play? I think more than anything, you want Danielle Hunter on your football team. It was just a bad break this year, but you're going to very likely sign him to a contract extension, because you can't just find Danielle Hunters. There are a lot of good pass rushers in the league, but when you start talking about the best of the best, you get to, Khalil Mack, Von Miller, who we'll talk about a little bit. Danielle Hunter is right up there in their air in terms of his production. So I think that this ultimately does not affect how they see him long-term, but it might affect like how much money the Vikings offer, that they may say, hey, look, we cannot sign you to a 5-year contract like we would with a player who had been healthy.
Yeah. And I wonder what he wants too. Like, would he want that 5-year contract for a little bit less of money because they're worried about injuries, or would he want a short-term deal to then kind of max out once he can prove that he's healthy? I mean, this, again, you mentioned it's kind of a little bit of a fluke injury. It probably isn't something that's repeating. And so maybe even after the neck injury, he felt like he could go out and prove it and didn't need to take money then. So I feel like he's probably going to bet on himself in that way. But I wonder if he would take a long-term deal with any injury, if he has worries about injury concerns. But yeah, we will for sure see. We're going to move on to Von Miller. You just mentioned him. Just got traded to the Rams from the Broncos. Fascinating what the Rams keep doing with just trading away all their draft picks. I think they only have a 3rd rounder, a 5th rounder, and 2 7ths this next year at the draft. So Spielman needs to cover his ears for that one. He would not like that at all. But again, I'm going to ask immediate and kind of long-term there as well. Von Miller to the Rams changes your perception of the Rams, or no?
I don't think so. No, I mean, he's still a very good player. I mentioned he's rare air for pass rushers. But one player, how much does one player really change an entire team, an entire defense? And I think that he has the name recognition, and he's not the easiest guy to block. He can certainly get after the passer. They already have a lot of talent on their defense with Aaron Donald and Jalen Ramsey. Defenses usually, though, are kind of weak link systems. So you're only as good as your weakest link. And also, as we just talked about, you're only as good as how healthy you are. And Von Miller has not been completely healthy in recent years. Now, that being said, they gave up a ton. They gave up a lot for somebody that Denver was kind of looking to trade because they don't want to sign him to another contract and so forth. And I think Denver made the right move here to say even, hey, we're in the playoff race, but we're probably not a Super Bowl contender. So this is smarter to just move on from this player and get a lot of draft capital for the future. I think that was a really smart move. I would say that I respect the Los Angeles Rams wanting to go all in and push all the chips to the middle of the table and to try to win the Super Bowl this year, because Matt Stafford is healthy and he's playing extremely well under Sean McVay. They have adapted their offense really, really well. And I think I even personally underestimated McVay's ability to adapt his offense to a big arm quarterback like Matt Stafford. So they've been hitting on deep passes all over the place. They have one of the most efficient offenses in the NFL. And I think if you're saying this is our year because the NFC is just not that special. We saw Tom Brady lose to a mediocre New Orleans team that was playing its backup quarterback for half of that game. Arizona looks fallible. Green Bay is certainly not perfect, though I think they'd be another team that you would pick here. And I think that anytime you can say to your fan base, hey, we are going for it, this is our year, let's go, that's exciting. And there's a lot of value in that. However, if you do not win the Super Bowl, you have no draft picks at all in the whole world to use. And the problem with that is people will say, the salary cap, it's a myth. It doesn't exist. I would point you in the direction of the Minnesota Vikings right guard situation and the depth situation. The Vikings are as good as it gets in the NFL in terms of adapting the salary cap or circumventing the salary cap. And still, it has become problematic that they have had draft picks go wrong, that Garrett Bradbury has not become a great player, that Jeff Gladney had his off-field problems. Like, these have become majorly problematic. So you're relying on Bashaud Breeland and other players that you've had to sign. Sheldon Richardson, they tried to bring in cheap, and that has not worked out. They tried to chase guards in the free agent market, but it was too expensive for them. So they had to move a 6th-round tackle to guard, and that has not worked out at all. And eventually, the Los Angeles Rams will get to that same spot. What they're saying is, we don't care. We've got enough good players right now, and we're going to figure out how to find the rest, and we're going to glue it together later, but we're going to worry about that later. We're going to go all in now. So much respect. That's very exciting for their fan base. That makes every game huge for them. That means if they have a big loss, it's going to be panic. And that means every win for them is going to be, we're going to the Super Bowl. And from that perspective, compared to where the Vikings are, I think you have to be a little jealous. I saw a lot of Vikings fans tweeting just about feeling like, well, once upon a time in 2018, the Vikings made an all-in type of move, and it was very exciting. It didn't play out. And if it doesn't, it really is a big hit to your franchise. So I respect the risk that they're taking. I don't know if it's the most prudent, but I think that at very least, if you're in the entertainment business, the Los Angeles Rams have entertained with this move.
For sure. And Von he's been playing well this season, already has 5 sacks, 28 total pressures, I believe like an 85 PFF grade overall. So playing really, really well. The question is just if he stays healthy. And yeah, I'm with you. What my head immediately went to, because of course Twitter goes ablaze on how they don't have any draft picks. And then you get, well, they've been doing this for several years. And it just really puts so much pressure on hitting some of those late round, mid round picks, the ones that you do have. And they have been good at that in recent years. They've gotten good players there. But I mean, we've seen it with the Vikings. You can go on hot streaks. You can go on cold streaks with those mid round, late round picks. And it's really just a coin flip. So they might have worked out the last 3 times, but it's going to come around and it's not going to work. And that's when it's going to fall apart. And so, yeah, the Vikings fans don't have to look far to kind of see that with the salary cap. The Saints have done it too. They've managed to slightly kind of stay above water, even though pushing money into future years. And just it's worked for them. The Vikings were kind of seeing it crumble a little bit. So it will be really interesting, and health, like it is for any team, is going to be really, really important. But if the Rams stay healthy, man, I mean, they're really, really good. They have just really a lot of playmakers on both sides of the ball now, and they're going to be dangerous if they can stay healthy. I want to jump to a team that isn't so healthy. Another piece of injury news that we got was Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry's out for the year, and the Titans acted quickly there. They immediately went and signed a familiar name, Adrian Peterson. He's going to be back, running the ball, seeing what he has left. I just want your overall thoughts on AP going to the Titans, and if they can still contend at this point with AP and with Derrick Henry out now.
Well, I would say one thing is that we should never doubt that Adrian Peterson is in shape, because Adrian Peterson has one of the most unique bodies, I think, in NFL history. I mean, not only his size speed combination, which Derrick Henry is in the rare air with Adrian Peterson of guys who are that big and that fast, but also Adrian Peterson's sheer ability to keep playing and stay healthy in recent years. And even as recently as the last couple of seasons, he's shown a little bit of bursts that remains there where you get that flicker of, oh, wow, yeah, that's Adrian Peterson who still has a little jump in the tank. However, it's really hard to see Adrian Peterson living up to what they've relied on with Derrick Henry, which is somebody carrying the ball 20 times a game, 25 times a game, and being the centerpiece of their offense. I think that ultimately, though, this can play in the Tennessee Titans' favor. As great as Derrick Henry is, and I'm not saying it's good that he got hurt because he's an incredible weapon and he's extremely hard to stop. But now they have to focus on some of their playmakers down the field. And what you saw against the Indianapolis Colts for them was they started throwing to A.J. Brown all the time. And A.J. Brown is an unstoppable, terrific wide receiver who probably hasn't gotten his target share because they're so focused on running the football all the time with Derrick Henry. Adrian Peterson, if he can at very least just fill the void, break off a couple of Adrian Peterson runs, then they could just start throwing the ball a lot more often. I don't know if Adrian Peterson is going to draw the attention, though, that Derrick Henry did. I think that if you're an opposing team, you're saying, okay, beat us with the old man then. He has been able to average around 4 yards a carry in these last couple seasons when he's gotten an opportunity. Their offensive line is good when it comes to run blocking, but it's hard to see him suddenly stepping in, averaging 5 yards a carry, breaking off 75-yard touchdowns, and forcing other teams to bring everybody up into the box. So now it's really on Ryan Tannehill to show that he's more than just a Jimmy Garoppolo or Kirk Cousins where they're trying to run the football first and do a lot of play actions. So this will be an interesting test for a Tennessee Titans team that has beaten some really good teams in the NFL. I mean, they took apart the Kansas City Chiefs. They beat the Buffalo Bills in a shootout game. And then they had to play a very difficult game against Indy, who's not a joke. And they came away with the win in that one. So now we'll see if they can sort of transform as they go forward, because I just don't think Adrian Peterson fills quite the shoes of Derrick Henry. If this was like 7 years ago, for sure.
Yeah, and it's a bummer because I believe the Titans, I think after yesterday's win, they were the 1 seed, I think they're currently the 1 seed in the AFC, and now to lose their workhorse. And I think for years we thought Derrick Henry just wouldn't get hurt with the way he plays and just the indestructible nature that he seems to have. And it finally happened, which it happens to a lot of running backs. I'm sure we shouldn't be surprised. He's the one running back when he gets hurt. I am surprised though. And yeah, it really comes down to, can they embrace the pass? And it kind of reminds me of the Vikings. Your running back goes down. Are you now going to go with your playmakers, with A.J. Brown, with Julio Jones? Are you going to go that route? Or are you going to continue to do what you were always doing? And I don't know. I don't know if Vrabel's ready to do that. We haven't seen that because Derrick Henry has been healthy. So it's really going to be interesting to see what mode they take. If they just try to plug Adrian Peterson in, have him be just a diet Derrick Henry and try to get by, or if they're going to transform their offense. And I feel like that's the only way that they elevate themselves to continue to be contenders, is if they transform and say, okay, we're going to become a passing team now. We're going to see what Ryan Tannehill does. It's what we've been asking for Kirk Cousins. Like, the potential, the ceiling of this team comes if you just embrace the pass. It may go horribly and you may lose a lot of games, but it is also your best shot. And so what do the Titans want to be? Do they want to have a chance at a Super Bowl? I think then they have to change. If they, are content getting into the first, second round of the playoffs and losing, then maybe they stay where they are. And so it's going to be a barometer for where they want to be, what they can see themselves as a non-Derrick Henry team, because they haven't really had to think about it. When you have Derrick Henry on your team, it's pretty easy to figure out what your identity is going to be. And now they don't have that. And so where do they go? And I guess that's what we're going to find out here. Another team that's going to be doing a little bit of that is the Saints. Jameis Winston out for the year with a ACL and MCL injury, I believe. And so now that's an interesting spot for them. There's Taysom Hill, obviously, who's coming off a concussion, might be back this week or next or pretty soon. Then they have Trevor Siemian, short-time Vikings backup quarterback to Kirk Cousins. I don't believe ever gotten an actual game and played any snaps. Do you think they should go get someone? I know the trade deadline's Tuesday, so we may already know at this point when people are listening to this. Should they go sign Cam Newton? That's really my question, because he's the one out there that they could go get. What do you think about that idea?
Yeah, there's a couple of different approaches here for the New Orleans Saints. I think that signing Cam Newton makes the most sense. And then you don't play him for a month. You bring him in, and then you have him sit, you have him learn the offense. Now, Cam Newton, you have to understand, I mean, this is a guy who has been a starter for a long time. Like, he understands NFL offenses. He'll be able to pick up Sean Payton's offense. And could you think of a more quarterback-friendly offense than the New Orleans Saints? I think that would be a lot easier for Cam Newton than it was with the New England Patriots. And even with New England, Cam Newton looked pretty good in preseason. And he also had times last year where he was pretty good. And then he got COVID. The second half of the year was tough. They didn't have a lot of weapons for him. But I think that Sean Payton is truly masterful, and Alvin Kamara, the way that he impacts their passing game too, would really fit what Cam Newton is still able to do. And then he can add that extra element of being a running quarterback. I don't see why you don't do it, because they have a team that's still strong enough for right now to be competitive in the NFC, to get into the playoffs, to win a playoff game. And if somebody has to go, if they were able to win enough, go to the Superdome. The Vikings know how tough that is. It's not an easy place to win. And I think you would look at it and say, well, look, I mean, they have a lot of these players who are kind of like the contract situations, and who knows what their futures will be, or they're in their primes, and you have to try to win right now. That makes sense to me, because the way the NFC is laid out, you could survive a month. You could go 1-3 and still be right there in the thick of the playoff race if you're trying to play Taysom Hill, or if you're trying to play Trevor Siemian. And then you could just try to get through it for Cam Newton. The other guy that comes to mind for this too is Tyrod Taylor. Why would the Houston Texans want to play a quarterback who could win them a game? And Tyrod Taylor could get hot. They should be wanting to draft number 1 overall and take their next quarterback, or take, that pass rusher from Oregon, and start rebuilding their franchise. They should try to lose every game and draft number 1 or number 2, depending on how Detroit plays the rest of the way. That's what they should be looking for. Play Davis Mills the whole year. Let him be your Jimmy Clausen, or the number of other quarterbacks who have sort of had to take the beating as their team lost every single game. There's no reason to bring back Tyrod Taylor. The other one that's kind of a low-key one that would be very interesting. Now, the salary cap, this becomes very tough for any of these deals, but Teddy Bridgewater would be the other one. If the Denver Broncos have played Teddy Bridgewater for a half a season and said, I think we should just go with Drew Lock and see if he can be our guy for the future, give him those final 8 games. Teddy Bridgewater was 5-0 with Sean Payton before. There's a great relationship there. Sean Payton even told Mike Zimmer that he thought he had his future quarterback in Teddy Bridgewater. Obviously, it didn't work out timing-wise because Drew Brees came back. But instead of Winston, that would have been Teddy Bridgewater if Drew Brees had retired 2 years ago instead of last year. And so I think that there's maybe a slight chance. Now, Denver's 4-4. So they could say, hey, we're in the playoff race. We're going to keep riding Teddy and see if we can get in the postseason. They have not been in the playoffs in a while. They need that. But I think that's kind of like a low-key one, that relationship might matter. And this New Orleans team, to me, has every reason to try and trade for somebody else or to sign Cam Newton.
Yeah, and I mean, you beat the Tampa Bay Bucks with just, put this Trevor Siemian. You're just trying to get by, and you win that game. And so there's no reason why they shouldn't be going for it this year. I mean, the way their contracts are set up, it's set up to win right away all the time. So they shouldn't be packing it in. And so, yeah, I like the Cam Newton option. I like Tyrod. I like Teddy. My fun one, I don't think it would ever happen, or maybe, but just try to bring back Drew Brees, see what he can do. I mean, it might be a
with the hair,
option.
Drew Brees with hair now.
Yeah. Maybe that reinvigorates him. He looked pretty done, but just for fun, entertainment, that I'd love the little Brett Favre renaissance by Drew Brees. He comes out of the booth and just gets right back in there. Maybe you can convince Phillip Rivers to get back out there. I'm looking at the old quarterbacks. Who can you bring out of retirement for that? There's weirdly kind of a decent amount of options for them. And with the roster they have around with the quarterback, Jameis didn't have to do that much in the first place. It doesn't have to be a spot where you get someone who's going to win you games. They're really set up to just be a game manager role. So yeah, I'm kind of hoping for bring an old quarterback out of the woodwork, see what Sean Payton can rekindle, but he might just ride with Taysom Hill. Who knows? There's really a plethora of options there for them.
Yep. Yeah, I think the Phillip Rivers one would be super fun. Phillip Rivers and Sean Payton together. I don't know if Phillip Rivers is in shape to play in the NFL though.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Well, let's get out. We got one more hot route, then we're going to let you get out of here. And we're going back to the Vikings for this one. I think the Dallas game just reached a fever pitch in terms of the people want change. They want it wherever they can get it. If that's Mike Zimmer, if that's Kirk Cousins, if that's Rick Spielman, if it's all of it, they just seem to want change. I have a couple buddies who have been pretty staunch supporters of just kind of keeping it the way it is. And both of them texted me after the game last night and said, okay, I'm done. And so that feels like a wider just consensus that the fan base seems to be coming to at this point. Slowly, it seems more and more people are hopping off. And I think the logical start would be Mike Zimmer. And if you would ever get rid of him, and I'm just wondering what would have to happen for them to let go of him mid-season? Like, would it have to get really bad? Do you feel like it's close enough where it doesn't have to go that much farther? Like, how far realistically do you feel like we are away from him being gone mid-season?
Yeah, I think that it makes sense for the organization to let this whole thing play out and to see if you make the playoffs and then make your decision at the end, because the way that the NFC is set up. Now, I did see Russell Wilson had the pin out of his finger. So all of a sudden, Seattle is not out of it. And also, Jimmy Garoppolo won a game for San Francisco the other day. And if he's healthy, they're not out of it either. There's some teams jockeying for position with the Vikings that might be just as good or just as flawed, but maybe have easier schedules than the Vikings. So you might as well let it play out and see if you can make the playoffs, see if you can win a playoff game, and then decide when the whole season is over instead of in this sort of heat of each week living and dying with the results. With that said, they got to go to Baltimore. They have to go to Los Angeles, and then they play Green Bay here in 3 weeks. And that seems like that's the game. If they don't win the next 2 weeks, I think you're looking at it like that's it. I mean, if you can't beat Green Bay, if you can't pull an upset there, keep yourself in the playoff race, then that's the moment you make the decision, is when you've fallen out of the playoff race and you've had these same results over and over again. Think about last year. I mean, they're a 7-9 football team, but they had to win in week 17 against the Detroit Lions, of all people, who were playing, I think, without their head coach who they'd fired and without their offensive coordinator who had COVID. And so that's the team you beat by 2 points or something at the end of the year. So really you were more like a 6-10 football team last year. And now you come into this year with a lot of money spent, a lot of contracts restructured, a lot of free agents signed, and you're expected to produce much better results. And yet this year has felt extremely 2020-ish. That they've played close games a lot of times, just as they did last year. And against the really bad teams, they've come out with some wins, but they've also had some extreme disappointments as well. So if you were to get to a point where you're looking at 3-6 and your arch rival has come in here and run you out of the building, there's really no reason to stick with it at that point. There might not be another heir apparent to look at, unlike if it was Kevin Stefanski at the time, but there's just no reason to continue going forward with it at that point. And you have to show the fan base, look, we care that there has been so much underachievement over the last 4 years. And I think until that Cowboys game, until the Cooper Rush game, there were a lot of people who were hanging on to, hey, this team could get hot. They could be good. They could go down the stretch and fight. And that's still possible. I'm not going to say that's impossible. It's never impossible if you're not out of it, if you're still in the playoff race. But I think what that did is, okay, this really is the same team that they've been running out there the last 4 years. And think about this. Since they signed Kirk Cousins, they have won 0 NFC North championships. And they've been favored to win the NFC North multiple times during that. The Chicago Bears have been in the playoffs more than they have. If both the Bears and the Vikings miss the playoffs this year, that'll be 4 years with the Bears making it twice and the Vikings making it once. Like that, you have to show at some point that that's not acceptable. So they have to turn it around. It has to be this week. It has to be winning 2 out of the next 3 games in my mind. And then the schedule lightens up ever so slightly. You've got a Lions game mixed in. You've got some Bears games mixed in that you could win. But these next 3 weeks are kind of it. And whether they do it, if they lose the next 3 games, whether they do it against, the Packers after that game or wait till the end of the season, we'll know that it's really over. I think at that point, if they fall to, 3-6.
Yeah. I think if they lose that, maybe 3-7 at that point.
3-7 if they lose the Packers game.
They lose the Packer game.
Yep.
And that's kind of where I'm at too. Cause they win one of those games and the rest of the NFC playoff picture isn't going great, maybe you talk yourself into him coaching that 49ers game because maybe that's a pivotal game in where you're going. But yeah, to me, it's if they're 3-7 at that point. I believe I was listening to you and Sam on the post game. I believe that was when they fired Brad Childress, was 3-7 when he was 3-7. So they've done it in a similar spot before. And yeah, at that point, they're very much eliminated from the playoffs. And it really doesn't matter who steps in for them. If you put Andre Patterson up there, if you put Clint Kubiak up there, just for a moment, it's at that point, you're just moving on. You're saying we're going to have a fresh start and we're going to take more time to evaluate who we want. And I think, yeah, 3-7 feels like where it's going to be. And so I can definitely see it happening because these next 3 games, I mean, they're not going to be favored to win any of them, or they shouldn't be favored to win any of them, I don't think. And so that's a realistic possibility. And that then means there's a realistic possibility that the Zimmer era ends soon, which I don't think we were going to be saying just a few weeks ago, but the way it's transpired both in wins and losses, it just feels like the end seems to be near. And we'll see if it's at some point this season, at the end of the season, or if they can turn it around and he buys himself more time. We really will see.
Yep. We'll see how much they want to fight for it because the offense against the Dallas Cowboys, I mean, the defense, I think, did their job until the very, very end. And then even a bad bounce on that catch by Cooper, the big play, was just a bit of luck there. But how much does the offense really want to fight? How much does Zimmer want to change something there in their approach? Or how much does Cousins want to make the playoffs? I mean, does he want to push the ball down the field to Justin Jefferson? I thought it was really telling that Mike Zimmer said, we had some of those plays dialed up. They just didn't happen. And you think, okay, well, what is that telling us? Right. So, I mean, this is setting up for a ton of pressure on everyone. And it goes one way or the other. It goes down the path of, wow, everyone was about to get fired after they lost to Cooper Rush, and that was the wake-up call. Or it goes down the path of, that's the one that took it all apart, and we'll know in a few weeks which way it goes.
Well, we will be here twice a week throughout that to figure out where it goes. This was a long one, but we had a lot to get to today. So, Matt, thank you so much for being here, and we will see you next time on Hot Routes.